Hey tribe, it's Stephanie Dickson and welcome to the Wedge TV, your weekly dose of inspiration, knowledge and action. Now we've all heard the term positive thinking or think positively, but what does it actually mean? Why is it important and how can it help us? Well, today we're delving into the psychology of positive thinking and how our emotions can actually affect us and how we can understand them better. Because sometimes it's just great to know the science. Teodora is a psychologist and psychotherapist with the School of Positive Psychology. She's worked with both children and adults as a prolific presenter and facilitator. She's put her passion into raising awareness on topics such as self-knowledge, emotional literacy, the psychological impact of technology on children and adults, and the neuroscience of relationships. Teodora, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me here. You know, I've been a fan of the Wedge for a while, so I'm very excited to be here and to speak
That's
to
very
you.
sweet. Great. And so let's set the scene for everyone watching here today. What do we even mean when we're talking about positive psychology?
So positive psychology is basically a branch within the wider field of the art and science of psychology. And interestingly enough, it was actually born out of deep frustration. So the man who's considered to be the founder, Dr. Martin Seligman, was trained in the kind of conventional mainstream way that we are all trained in. And he got to a point where he became really frustrated with the fact that the question that we're asking is what is wrong with people? What is wrong with their mood? What is wrong with their relationships? You know, that a very kind of negative way of approaching people. So what he wanted to do was kind of turn that question around and kind of turn the whole field around on its head and ask, okay, what is right with people? And that's a really huge paradigm shift if you think about it, especially for those of us in the field. He created huge change, and basically what that means in practice is that what we firstly want to look at is people who have relatively stable moods, have a pretty good self-awareness, emotional intelligence, emotional regulation, pretty healthy relationships, and then we want to look at and extract basically the methods that they're using and try and teach the people who are not quite as skilled.
I think that's really fantastic, that reframe, and how brave of him to be the one to be like, no, it's not what's wrong with people, it's what's right. I think that is incredible.
Yeah, our field is very old-fashioned, so for someone to come in and say something like that, it's quite exceptional.
Yeah, really exceptional.
Yeah.
So what are some of the misconceptions around this idea of positive psychology?
Well, I think the biggest kind of troublemaker is that positive in positive psychology. Like I said, it initially wants to look at people who kind of got it right, or what we consider to be got it right, and then extract from them these skills and these methods that they have. For me, when I work with clients, especially young children, I tend to not use qualifiers like positive or negative, or good or bad for emotions. I tend to prefer using either pleasant or unpleasant, because that's basically what our feelings are, or emotions are. And again, it's a really huge kind of paradigm shift in terms of how you think about the way you feel. And so I think that's the main kind of misconception, is that all that we're interested in is happy thoughts and happy people, and that we're trying to push everyone to be that way, which is just, it's not possible, if nothing else.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it is really important to have, the plethora of emotions, because otherwise you wouldn't know what happiness is if you didn't experience sadness.
Exactly. There's that dark light contrast there, that you don't know what light is until you have the dark.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
So if we're looking at positivity and building on this idea of pleasant feeling, what does that really mean? And when we are thinking positively in this kind of sense, unpack that a little bit.
We're interested in the whole, like you said, the whole plethora of emotions. We're interested in all of that. And when it comes to positive thinking, really the way I kind of conceptualize it, which I think is a relatively easy way of looking at it, is that it kind of exists along two timelines. So you have the long term and you have the short term. So when I say long term, I mean your kind of day-to-day practices. The short term is when you're in a crisis, a personal crisis, or you're experiencing a stressful situation. So in terms of the long term, there are many things that we can do, kind of tiny little actions day by day, that help us to build upon our ability to think positively. So one of or two of the main things are really increasing our capacity to feel and express gratitude and compassion. And not just for other people, but ourselves as well. And research looking at a mindfulness meditation that incorporates feelings of compassion and gratitude has really come out with great results. So that's one thing. Another thing is investing in healthy relationships, building a network. So if it's just one person or 20, whatever it is, as long as you surround yourself by by people who help you create those kind of healthy relationships. So that's a few of the things. That's kind of the long-term timeline, the long-term investment. So you're going to be drawing from those in those short-term periods. So when you do go through a personal crisis or you experience an incredibly stressful event, the first thing you want to do is to allow yourself to feel whatever it is that's coming up in that moment. So that then in the aftermath you can draw from your long-term investments, whether it's calling a really, really good friend or a family member, or having your partner there to support you, whether it's going back into your practice of feeling gratitude, feeling compassion, even though you've been, whether it's wronged or hurt or whatever else it is. And then that will really help you to build on your sense of self-worth, again, self-compassion, self-confidence, and then optimism as well, which again, Martin Seligman has written a lot about that, and he's shown that optimism is, a healthy dose of optimism is really, really important.
So I think that's an amazing amount of information that you just gave. Thank you for sharing. And a couple of things that I really liked is, that we can always go back to these tools, and that it really is a long-term investment, just like anything. It's like if you're an entrepreneur, you're on that journey, it's going to be a long haul. If you want a six-pack at the gym, you're going to have to put in the long hours. And I think it's the same thing. If you want to have that positive outlook, you need to rewire and go into this long-term investment thinking. So I think that's really great that you've touched on that point. So can you share us a little bit more? Let's get into this idea of happiness. So what are some of the myths, and what does it really mean for people to be happy?
To be happy.
Everyone's always searching for more happiness, right?
Yes, they are. So one of the things that I first have to say, which I think is probably a little bit controversial, is that we're not built for happiness. So I know plenty of people, I'm sure you do, I'm sure our viewers do as well. You'll know a lot of people who go by that philosophy that we're happy beings and we deserve to be happy, or whatever terminology you want to use around. But my view is informed through kind of biology, human nature, evolution. So if we look at ourselves from that perspective, we're not designed to be in a happy state by default. We're designed to survive. So if you think about our ancestors, hundreds of millions of years ago, and if you think about how we kind of define a happy state of being, we wouldn't be around to talk about it if they had been walking around the plains kind of happy, cheerful, and chipper with these kind of zen, thoughts in their minds, because they would have gotten eaten. And so we've had hundreds of millions of years of reinforcement of that. They really had to utilize kind of drastic emotions such as fear, such as anger, in order to survive. And what that's kind of brought along with it is what we call the negativity bias. But, and there is a huge but, our brain is very malleable. It's very soft in that sense. And so we can really teach it a lot of things, and we can train it to not succumb to that negativity bias as much. And again, we have research that's shown that 40% of our happiness we actually have power over through intention, so through kind of purposeful activities. And then the myths that mostly tend to be related to happiness can really easily be discovered if you just construct the sentence, I will be happy when I have the great job, the pair of shoes, the husband, the wife, the partner, the whoever, all of those things that revolve around kind of external validation and the circumstances that we're in. So I can't be or I can't be happy until I live in a great apartment, I drive a great car, whatever it is. So what Dr. Lubomirsky has shown is that those circumstances actually only account for 10% of our happiness. The 50% that remains kind of goes down to our genetic makeup, which we tend to think of as a fixed point or a kind of set point of happiness, as she calls it. But a lot of new research is coming out now suggesting that maybe we do have some say in that as well. But I think the really important point to kind of focus on is that 40% versus the 10%, and in that 10% is where all those myths lie, basically.
Yeah, that's really shocking, but I love the stats.
Yeah,
the stats
exactly.
Always
it's all about the
everything
stats.
into
Absolutely.
perspective.
And she's really great at that because she's done tons of research. So you read her books and you see things very, very clearly. It's very, very black and white.
No, I think that's fantastic.
Yeah.
And I know that you do a lot of work with people's emotions and how we can deal with that. So can you share a little bit about, how we can actually use our emotions and how we can understand them more, because we all feel them. And I think a lot of people just like stifle now.
Sure, absolutely.
So tell us a bit about that.
Yeah. So that's kind of the primary thing that when people come in for therapy or counseling, or when they go see a psychiatrist even, they're kind of usually two things that are very closely related that have kind of gone off track. So one will be their relationships. There will usually be a problem within one or more of their relationships, and then their emotions as well. And that kind of goes into a couple of the points I made earlier about allowing ourselves to feel what we feel, and also kind of knowing what we're feeling. So I think the trouble, as with most of these things, can start in childhood. Because if you think about it, kids, when we're kids, we're not rewarded for feeling angry or feeling sad, definitely not for feeling afraid. And there are these gender biases in terms of how we parent girls and boys. Things like, boys don't cry, or, girls are supposed to be very meek and gentle. But we're basically sent the messages early on that, okay, there are these emotions that you can feel free to share with other people, express freely as much as you want. These ones you're not supposed to, they're not appropriate, they're not right. And it's not done in that much of a direct way. There are subtle ways of these things being woven into our subconscious. And I have an example from my personal life. When I was about 2 years old, when I just started going off to nursery, my mom said that I was standing at the door, my eyes were full of tears, but I had this smile on my face, and I just kept waving at her, and she said, "You wouldn't let a single tear drop out of your eye because you wanted me to see that you were fine and you were happy and you were okay." So that's definitely where it starts. And then what you end up with is an adult who doesn't know their emotions, they're not sure what they're feeling, they know it's something very deep, and like you said, it's often really being repressed, and we know that it has to come out some way. So it just kind of pushing it down makes it only worse. And again, another paradigm shift in terms of talking about understanding our emotions is that emotions are very functional. Anger is supposed to help us defend ourselves or our loved ones. Frustration is supposed to bring about some kind of change. I think anyone who's an entrepreneur will be very familiar with that kind of feeling. It often helps you kind of change lanes a little bit. So again, if we think about feelings in that way, one thing it does is it helps us to kind of distance ourselves from them a tiny bit and also observe them. And again, a lot of mindfulness practices will really work on that. Another aspect of that is knowing what our emotions feel like in our bodies, so body awareness. A lot of new methods in psychotherapy are focusing on that, so they call it body intelligence. So two of the things that are definitely really important is to understand what your emotion looks like just on your face, for starters. Get in front of the mirror and just smile, or look like you're really angry, or look like you're really sad, whatever it is. And also, again, practices like mindfulness, progressive relaxation can really help you feel, where do you feel your anger in your body, or where do you feel whatever it is. By doing them over and over again, you're going to be a lot more comfortable with them, which means that once you are in that personal crisis or a stressful situation, you're going to be a lot better and kind of more skilled at allowing the emotion to come through and to kind of lead you where you naturally need to be, because that's what emotions do a lot of the time. It's just that because we don't let them through, they take us in all kinds of awkward ways because we try and cope with that as best as we can, and then we just kind of get completely confused. Yeah.
Okay, great. That was really wonderful. So much great information there. So I guess if there was maybe like all this incredible knowledge, so if we can just dilute that down into one action that our viewers can sort of take right now to sort of start implementing some of this amazing knowledge, what would that be?
One of the most kind of neat and short things that you could do is use that sentence, or the beginning of the sentence that I referred to earlier. So I will be happy when I. And if you just write that down, again, writing's been shown to be really therapeutic. If you write that down in a notebook and see what comes up for you, see what are the kinds of things that you've attached your happiness to, and the things that have kind of, if you really think about it, been holding you hostage all this time. So I think that would be an interesting activity for everyone to try.
Wonderful. So let's just wrap up with your favorite wedge of wisdom.
If you believe that the world is a good place, you'll find a lot of evidence for the fact that it's a good place. And if you believe that it's an awful place, you'll find a lot of information that will support that as well. So if that is the case, then why not choose which one you're going to focus on? The other one is a quote by Viktor Frankl, who was a Holocaust survivor and the founder of existential psychology, and he said that between the stimulus and our response, there's this moment, whether it's at a second or a split second, and in that moment is where our freedom lies. So that's the moment in which you can choose not to react the way our ancestors would, but really to think about what you want to do next and to respond. And that's what really makes us human. So those two.
Wonderful,
Yeah.
really beautiful, very well thought out, and I think a lot of people can take a lot from it.
I hope so. I hope so. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much
Yeah.
for joining us, and thank
Thank
you
you.
for watching. If you liked this episode, we'd be very grateful if you could subscribe to our YouTube channel. I hope you learned something today so you can live more consciously tomorrow.